They took the wrong girl. Her father turned out to be their worst nightmare. What would you do if your child disappeared in the blink of an eye? How far would you go to bring them back? Some say a parent's love knows no bounds, but when a dangerous man becomes a father, that love becomes something else entirely, something that even the worst criminals should fear. It all began on a perfect spring afternoon. Emma Collins, 17, was walking home from school, her long brown hair swaying in the gentle breeze as she strolled down the familiar sidewalk. Like any teenager, she was lost in her phone, texting friends and planning weekend activities. She never noticed the black SUV that had been following her slowly from the end of the block. She never saw the danger until it was too late. In a matter of seconds, Emma's world shattered. The vehicle screeched to a halt beside her. Two doors swung open simultaneously and masked men lunged toward her. One muffled scream escaped her lips before a rough hand covered her mouth. The struggle lasted only moments, her backpack falling to the pavement, her phone shattering on impact, before they forced her into the vehicle. The doors slammed shut, and the SUV sped away, leaving nothing but a discarded backpack and an ominous silence on the once peaceful street. Hours passed. At the Collins household, panic had set in. Emma's mother, Laura, paced the living room floor, trembling hands pressed against her tear-streaked face. Police officers filled their modest home, asking questions, taking notes, making calls. They spoke of protocols and procedures, of statistics and possibilities. But their carefully chosen words couldn't hide the grim reality. Every passing hour decreased the chances of finding Emma alive. Then the phone rang. Laura lunged for it, hope and terror battling in her eyes. "Hello? Emma? Please, is that you?" Her voice cracked with desperation. On the other end, only heavy breathing, then silence. The line went dead. When it rang again moments later, Mark Collins, Emma's father, gently took the phone from his wife's shaking hands. His face remained unnervingly calm as he answered, "This is Mark Collins." The voice that responded was cold, distorted. "We have your daughter. $500,000. No police, or she dies." Mark's expression didn't change. Nothing in his demeanor revealed the storm raging within him. "I want proof she's alive," he said, his voice steady, controlled. A pause, then shuffling sounds. Emma's terrified voice came through. "Dad!" Just one word, broken with fear, before the kidnapper returned to the line. "You have 48 hours. We'll call with instructions. Tell your police friends to back off. We're watching." Something shifted in Mark's eyes then. Something dark and ancient, like a door opening to a place that had been locked away for decades. "You should know who you're dealing with," he said, his voice dropping to a nearly inaudible whisper. The kidnapper laughed. "A desperate father with a fat bank account, nothing more." "You're wrong," Mark replied. "You took my daughter. That's the last mistake you'll ever make." After hanging up, Mark stood motionless, staring at the phone as the police officers exchanged concerned glances around him. Laura collapsed into sobs on the couch, but Mark didn't cry, he didn't rage. Instead, he walked quietly to the basement door, his movements suddenly different, precise, calculated, lethal. Because what the kidnappers didn't realize was that they hadn't just taken any girl. They had taken the daughter of a man who had spent decades burying his true identity. A man who had once been something that made even hardened criminals tremble. And as Mark descended those basement stairs toward a locked metal box he hadn't opened in nearly 20 years, one thing became crystal clear. The hunters were about to become the hunted. But what Mark was about to discover when he opened that box would reveal a connection to his past that even he wasn't prepared for. A connection that would make this kidnapping far more personal than anyone could have imagined. In the dim light of the basement, Mark's fingers hovered over the dusty metal box. To the world, He was just Mark Collins, a quiet mechanic who fixed engines and lived for his family, the kind of man who coached Little League and helped neighbors with household repairs. Unremarkable, forgettable, exactly as he had intended. But 20 years ago, he had been someone else entirely. Mark inserted an old key into the lock, and the mechanism clicked open. Inside lay the remnants of a life he had abandoned. Several passports with different names, but the same face, stacks of cash in various currencies, a satellite phone that hadn't been charged in years, and beneath it all, a matte black handgun. Wrapped in oiled cloth, his fingers traced the cold metal, muscle memory flooding back as he checked the mechanism with practiced precision. There was also a small leather notebook with coordinates, codes, and names, most crossed out. The last entry, dated 18 years ago, simply read, Mark Collins, born today, the day he had walked away from his former life, the day he had chosen to become a father instead of what he had been, a ghost, a weapon, a man without a name. Before, he was Mark Collins. He had been Agent 37, one of the most lethal operatives in a Black Ops unit so classified that even most intelligence agencies denied its existence. Trained in every method of infiltration, extraction, and elimination, he had moved through the shadows of the world's most dangerous places, dismantling threats before they made headlines. He wasn't just good at what he did, he was the nightmare the terrorists and warlords told stories about until he met Laura. She had been a nurse, volunteering in a conflict zone, brave, kind, entirely too good for the world she had stepped into. Assigned to extract her when the region destabilized, Mark found himself doing something he had never done before, falling in love. With her came the promise of something he had never thought possible: normalcy, peace, a life without blood on his hands. When they discovered Laura was pregnant with Emma, Mark made the decision. He approached his handlers, called in every favor he was owed, and disappeared. The agency didn't let assets walk away easily, but they respected his terms. Complete separation in exchange for his silence and the closure of his final mission. A dangerous bargain that had held until now. Upstairs, Laura sat with the police, answering questions through tears. "My husband, he's not handling this well. He's in the basement. He needs time." The detective nodded sympathetically. "Mrs. Collins, I understand this is difficult, but we need to know if there's anyone who might target your family specifically. Enemies, business rivals, anything unusual?" Laura shook her head, dabbing at her eyes. "We're just ordinary people. Mark fixes cars. I work at the elementary school. Emma is a straight-A student. We don't have enemies." But as the words left her mouth, a chill ran through her. There was something about Mark she had always sensed but never questioned. The nightmares that woke him in cold sweats, the way his eyes constantly scanned rooms for exits, how he had insisted on teaching Emma self-defense from the age of 6. Little things that hadn't made sense for a simple mechanic. Meanwhile, Mark assembled what he needed with military efficiency. The gun was clean. The satellite phone, once charged, would connect him to contacts he hadn't spoken to in decades. People who owed him debts written in blood and silence. He changed clothes, replacing the soft flannel shirt and worn jeans with tactical pants and a fitted black shirt that revealed the muscular frame he had maintained through daily pre-dawn workouts. Just as he finished, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Laura stood there, her eyes wide, as she took in the transformation before her. The man she had married was gone, replaced by something else. "Mark." Her voice trembled. "What is this? Who are you?" For 18 years he had kept his past buried to protect her and Emma. Now that same past might be the only thing that could save their daughter. He met his wife's gaze, his eyes hard yet vulnerable. "Laura, there are things I've never told you, things I did before we met, the person I was." He paused, the weight of unsaid truths hanging between them. "I'm sorry. But right now, that person is exactly who Emma needs." Laura stepped forward, her hand reaching for his face, tracing the contours that suddenly seemed sharper, more dangerous. "All these years," she whispered. "I always knew there was something. I just never asked. I wanted to protect you both from my past. And now," Mark's jaw tightened, "now I'm going to use it to bring our daughter home." Upstairs, the lead detective's phone buzzed. The call lasted 30 seconds before his face drained of color. He signaled to his team, lowering his voice. "The kidnapper's vehicle has been identified. It's registered to a shell company linked to Lucas Farrow." The name sent a ripple of tension through the officers. Farrow, the mercenary, the one connected to that massacre in... the same. This just got a lot more complicated. What none of them realized was that Mark was now standing in the hallway, his face a mask of cold recognition at the mention of that name. Lucas Farrow. Not a random kidnapper, but a ghost from his past. A man whose brother had died during Mark's last mission. And suddenly, everything made terrible sense. This wasn't about money, it was about revenge. As Mark slipped out the back door while the police were distracted, a new determination hardened within him. This wasn't just about saving Emma anymore. It was about ending a blood vendetta that had finally caught up to him after all these years. But what he didn't know was that Emma was already beginning to realize her captors had made a terrible mistake. Because, while they had taken Mark Collins' daughter, they didn't understand that they had also taken the daughter of Agent 37. And he had taught her more than they could possibly imagine. Emma woke to the sound of dripping water. Her head throbbed, and the metallic taste of blood lingered in her mouth. The room was small and damp, with concrete walls that sweated moisture and a single flickering bulb swinging overhead, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to crawl across the floor. Her wrists were bound with zip ties tight enough to cut into her skin. She tried to swallow, but her throat was parched from screaming and crying. How long had she been here? Hours? A day? Time blurred in the windowless room. The heavy metal door scraped open, and a tall figure entered. Unlike the others who wore balaclavas, this man only wore a bandana covering the lower half of his face. His eyes were cold, calculating, with a scar running from his left eyebrow down his cheek, a jagged lightning bolt of raised tissue that pulsed when he spoke. "Finally awake, princess?" His voice carried an accent she couldn't place. "Your daddy must be worried sick." Emma stared back, trying to control her trembling. Don't show fear, her father had always taught her. Information is power. Remember everything. The man squatted in front of her, studying her face with unnerving intensity. "You know, when I saw your address, I expected some rich banker's kid. But your house?" He laughed. "Just a regular working-class family. So why? Would your father have access to $500,000? Emma remained silent, memorizing every detail about him. Height, build, the peculiar way he moved his left shoulder less than his right, the tattoo partially visible beneath his collar. "Not talking? That's okay." He stood up, towering over her. "My name is Lucas. I'll be your host until your father pays up. Or until..." His voice trailed off ominously. "Let's just hope he pays." As Lucas turned to leave, Emma spoke, her voice smaller than she wanted but steadier than he expected. "My father will come for me." Lucas turned back, amused. "Your father? The mechanic?" He laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the concrete walls. "The police are spinning their wheels and your father is probably falling apart. No one is coming. And for you, princess." But something in Emma's eyes, a quiet certainty that unnerved him, made his smile falter. Outside the room, Lucas joined 3 other men gathered around a table covered with weapons and burner phones. "The cops are all over the neighborhood," one reported. "They've got checkpoints on major roads." "Let them waste their time," Lucas dismissed. "The ransom call is set for tomorrow. By the time they trace anything, we'll be gone. And the girl..." He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew their orders. No witnesses. What Lucas didn't say was that this job was personal. The girl's father wasn't just some random target. 18 years ago, Mark Collins, or whatever his real name had been, had led the operation that killed Lucas's brother. It had taken years of digging through encrypted files and calling in favors to finally identify the mysterious operative who had disappeared after that night. The money was just a bonus. What Lucas really wanted was to make Mark Collins suffer, before killing him too. Meanwhile, at the Collins home, the police operation had reached full intensity. Officers swarmed the property, technicians traced phone signals, and detectives interviewed neighbors. But they had already lost something crucial: Mark Collins himself. Detective Rivera noticed it first. "Where's the father?" he asked Laura, who sat pale and exhausted on the couch. He said he needed air. "To think," she replied, her eyes darting to the window. Rivera immediately dispatched officers to search the immediate area, but he already suspected the truth. Fathers of kidnapped children often did desperate, foolish things, but something about Collins had struck him as different. The man's eyes had been too calm, too calculating, not the eyes of a panicked parent, but of someone assessing a tactical situation. What Rivera didn't know was that Mark was already 10 miles away, in a storage unit rented under a name that didn't exist in any database. Inside was a vehicle with clean plates and equipment even military contractors would envy. Surveillance gear, weapons, tactical clothing, all preserved with methodical care for a day he had prayed would never come. As he prepared, Mark's satellite phone buzzed. A text message with just 2 words. "Still operational," Mark replied, "Priority Alpha." The response came instantly. "Location?" Mark sent coordinates for a meeting point, then disabled the GPS. Within the hour, he would reconnect with individuals from his past, people who operated in shadows so deep that governments denied their existence, people who owed him. Back in the hideout, Emma focused on the lessons her father had drilled into her since childhood. Always be aware, look for patterns, find weaknesses. She had thought those lessons were just her dad being overprotective. Now she understood they had been preparation. From her position, she could hear the guards rotating shifts. 3 hours. On 3 off, the water pipe above her leaked precisely every 47 seconds. The guard who brought food limped slightly on his right leg. Small details that most captives would miss, but Emma had been raised by a man who noticed everything. She had also managed to hide something during her initial captivity, a small metal pin from her hair that now worked between her fingers as she methodically weakened the zip ties. It would take time, but time was all she had. What she didn't know was that one of her captors was growing increasingly uneasy. The youngest of them, a man called Vega, had been monitoring police channels. "Something's wrong," he told Lucas nervously. "The response is too organized, too focused. It's like they know exactly where to look." "Police get lucky sometimes," Lucas dismissed him. "No, it's more than that," Vega insisted. "And I checked the father's background like you asked. It's too clean. No social media history before 15 years ago, no records anywhere. It's like he appeared out of nowhere." Lucas's expression darkened. "Keep digging, and double the guards tonight." But it was already too late, because at that moment Mark Collins had just eliminated the first obstacle in his path to his daughter, a lookout posted half a mile from the hideout who never saw the shadow that approached from behind. Mark retrieved the man's radio and earpiece, then zip-tied him to a tree, gagged but alive. He wasn't killing indiscriminately. Every death created complications, but he would not hesitate if necessary. The radio crackled. "Checkpoint 4, report." Mark closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting his former self take complete control, then perfectly mimicked the unconscious man's voice. "Checkpoint 4, clear." As he moved silently toward the compound where his daughter was being held, Something cold and terrible settled in his chest, a familiar clarity he hadn't felt in almost 2 decades. He had once been the boogeyman that terrorists feared. Now he was something far more dangerous, a father with nothing to lose. But what neither Mark nor Emma yet realized was that Lucas Ferro had planned for the possibility that Mark might be more than he seemed. And the trap that awaited them both would force father and daughter to confront a truth that could destroy the family forever. The first man disappeared just after midnight. He had stepped outside the perimeter of the abandoned industrial complex to smoke, a brief moment of carelessness. His radio went silent mid-sentence. When Lucas sent another man to check, he too vanished. No gunshots, no sounds of struggle, just the unsettling silence of the night, suddenly deeper than before. Inside the main building, Lucas paced nervously, his scar pulsing with each heartbeat. Something wasn't right. Standard kidnapping protocol was unraveling around him. He barked orders into his radio. Everyone inside, now, full lockdown. As his remaining men gathered in the central area, Lucas noticed something on the security monitors that made his blood run cold. On the eastern wall of the compound, spray-painted in crimson and still glistening wet, "I'm coming for her." "When did this appear?" he demanded, pointing at the screen. His men exchanged confused glances. The camera had been checked 30 minutes ago. Nothing had been there. "Find out who's doing this," Lucas snarled. "Now!" But deep down, a terrible suspicion was forming, one that made his hands tremble slightly as he checked his weapon. What if the mechanic wasn't just a mechanic? What if, after all these years of planning his revenge, Lucas had made a catastrophic miscalculation? 2 miles away, Mark crouched in shadows, studying the thermal images on a specialized tablet. The device, military-grade and not available to civilians, showed him exactly how many bodies remained in the compound and their positions. He had already neutralized 3 perimeter guards, leaving them bound and unconscious. Beside him stood a wiry man with graying temples who observed with professional detachment. Ramirez had been his communications specialist in another life. Now he ran a private security firm, but had dropped everything at Mark's message. "Your old training is still solid," Ramirez commented quietly. 18 years, and you haven't lost a step." Mark didn't respond, his focus absolute. On his other side, a woman checked her equipment with methodical precision. Santos had once been the unit's best tactical expert. Now she was here, repaying a debt that went beyond money or loyalty. "The girl is in the northeast corner," Santos said, studying her own device. "Single heat signature, stationary, guards rotating every 20 minutes. Mark nodded, memorizing the pattern. Time to move to phase 2. Inside her concrete cell, Emma had made progress. The zip ties had weakened from her constant work, and she had managed to loosen a rusty pipe fitting near the floor, not enough to escape, but enough to create a weapon if needed. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Use what's available. Everything is a potential tool." A commotion outside her door drew her attention. Raised voices, agitated movement. Something had changed. The door flew open and Lucas entered, his face contorted with barely controlled rage. "Who is your father?" he demanded, grabbing her arm roughly. Emma's eyes widened with genuine confusion. He fixes cars." "Collins Auto Repair," Lucas slapped, her hard across the face, splitting her lip. "Don't lie to me. Who is he really?" Blood trickled down Emma's chin as understanding dawned. They were afraid. Something was happening outside these walls, something that made these dangerous men terrified. "Dad," she thought with a surge of hope. "He's coming." Outside, another guard had gone missing. The remaining men were now clustered together, backs against walls, jumping at shadows. A strange fog had begun to roll across the compound grounds, unnaturally thick and seemingly coming from nowhere. "It's just weather," one of the men said nervously. Vega, the youngest kidnapper, shook his head. That's not natural fog. That's smokescreen. Military grade. Lucas grabbed his satellite phone, dialing furiously. We need extraction now. Bring everything you've got. But the line was dead. And when they checked their radios and cell phones, they too had stopped working. Complete communications blackout. Whoever was coming for them had cut them off from the outside world. In the center of the compound, the power suddenly failed, plunging everything into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie red shadows across frightened faces. It's him, isn't it? Vega whispered to Lucas. The father. He's not just some mechanic. Lucas didn't answer, but his hand moved instinctively to the scar on his face, the mark left by a shadow operative during the mission that had killed his brother. A mark left by the man he had spent years hunting. Could it be the same person? Had he unknowingly taken the daughter of the very ghost he had sworn vengeance against? One of their men, stationed on the roof, suddenly reported movement along the western perimeter. Lucas ordered everyone to that position. But as they rushed to respond, none of them noticed the dark figure that had already slipped inside through the loading bay on the eastern side, exactly as planned. Mark moved through the darkness like it was an old friend, his movements silent and precise. The building's layout was already committed to memory from blueprints Ramirez had obtained. While his two former colleagues created distractions outside, Mark had one focus: locate Emma and extract her safely. He neutralized two guards in a hallway, using pressure points to render them unconscious without a sound. Each step brought him closer to the heat signature they had identified as his daughter. Meanwhile, the remaining kidnappers had realized they'd been tricked. As they rushed back toward the center of the building, panic was setting in. One of them fired wildly at a moving shadow, only to hit one of their own men. "Hold your fire, you idiots!" Lucas shouted, but discipline was crumbling. These were mercenaries used to having the upper hand, to inspiring fear rather than experiencing it. Now they were the ones being hunted. Lucas made a decision. If this was indeed the operative he suspected, their only chance was to use the girl as leverage. He ran toward Emma's cell, heart pounding, but as he rounded the corner, he collided with a solid form that seemed to materialize from the darkness itself. Lucas stumbled back, raising his weapon, but it was knocked from his hand with the precise strike. He found himself staring into eyes he had seen only once before, 18 years ago, on the worst night of his life. "You," Lucas breathed, recognition and fear mingling in his voice. Mark Collins, or the man who had once been Agent 37, stood perfectly still, his expression revealing nothing. "Where is my daughter?" Lucas forced a smile despite his terror. "Insurance policy. You take one more step, and my men will kill her. You know how this works." Mark's voice remained eerily calm. "Your men are down, Lucas. It's just you and me now. And I'm only going to ask once more, where is my daughter?" The tension between them was electric, years of hidden history crackling in the air. But before either man could move, a new sound echoed through the corridor. A metal door being forced open, followed by a grunt of pain and the thud of a body hitting the floor. Both men turned to see Emma standing over an unconscious guard, a broken pipe clutched in her bloodied hands. Her zip ties were cut, her face bruised but determined. She took in the scene before her, her father, now transformed into someone she barely recognized, facing off against her captor. "Dad," she whispered. For the briefest moment, something flickered. Across Mark's face, pride, relief, and terrible regret that his daughter was seeing this side of him. Lucas, seizing the distraction, lunged for his fallen weapon. But Mark was faster, delivering a strike so swift and precise that Lucas collapsed instantly, unconscious before he hit the ground. Mark turned to his daughter, the hardness in his eyes softening. "Emma." They stared at each other across a chasm of secrets and revelations. The facade of normalcy that had defined their relationship for 17 years had been shattered, revealing the truth beneath. Emma took a step forward, then another, until she was close enough to see the subtle differences in her father's posture, his movements, as though he had shed a disguise he had worn her entire life. "You taught me," she said quietly, holding up the improvised weapon. "All those self-defense lessons, the awareness training, you were preparing me." Mark nodded, unable to find words. Then, breaking all protocols he had once lived by, he pulled his daughter into a fierce embrace. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to see this." Emma clung to him, her body shaking with delayed shock and relief. "Who are you really?" she asked against his shoulder. Before Mark could answer, Santos's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Police inbound. 2 minutes, we need to move." The moment of reunion was cut short. They had to decide quickly, stay and face the authorities with all the questions that would follow, or disappear into the night, leaving the police to find only unconscious kidnappers and unanswered mysteries. But Lucas was stirring now, a cruel smile spreading across his face despite his defeated position. "She deserves to know the truth," he taunted, "about what her father really is, about the blood on his hands." Mark's expression hardened again as he made his choice, because what Lucas didn't realize was that Mark Collins had long ago prepared for this very moment, the day when his past would collide with his present. And what would happen next would change everything. "We need to move," Mark said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Now," Emma hesitated, glancing at the semi-conscious Lucas. "Dad, the police are coming. We should wait for them." Mark shook his head. "There are things they can't handle, things I need to finish." The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Through his earpiece, Santos reported, 90 seconds to contact. With practiced efficiency, Mark zip-tied Lucas's hands behind his back, then hoisted the man over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. "Follow me," he instructed Emma. "Stay close. Do exactly as I say." They moved through the darkened corridors, Mark navigating the labyrinthine building as if he'd memorized every turn. Emma struggled to reconcile this man, precise, lethal, commanding, with the father who had taught her to ride a bike and made pancakes every Sunday morning. They emerged from a service exit into the thick, artificial fog that still blanketed the compound. 2 shadows materialized beside them, Santos and Ramirez, both with weapons drawn. "Is this her?" Santos asked, giving Emma an appraising look. Mark nodded. "Emma, these are old friends. They're helping us." Emma took in these strangers with military bearing who seemed to know her father intimately, another piece of the puzzle she was struggling to assemble. "The van's waiting at the extraction point," Ramirez said. "But we've got movement on the north perimeter. Police tactical team." Mark made a split-second decision. "Change of plans. Take Emma to the secondary location. I'll handle Ferro and meet you there." "Dad, no!" Emma protested, grabbing his arm. "I'm not leaving you." For a moment, the hardness in Mark's eyes softened. "I have to finish this, Emma. It's the only way we'll ever be safe." Before she could argue further, police searchlights cut through the fog, voices shouting commands through megaphones. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Go!" Mark ordered, passing Lucas's still form to Ramirez. "I'll create a diversion." Santos took Emma's arm. "Your father knows what he's doing, kid. Trust him." With one last conflicted look at her father, Emma allowed herself to be led away, disappearing into the artificial fog with Santos, while Ramirez dragged Lucas in another direction. Mark turned toward the police line, took a deep breath, and stepped into the light with his hands raised. Detective Rivera approached cautiously, weapon drawn. "Mark Collins, what the hell are you doing here?" Mark's response was calm, rehearsed. "I followed them. They have my daughter. Please, you have to help her." Rivera's suspicion was evident. "How did you find this place?" "I tracked my daughter's phone," Mark lied smoothly. "I couldn't just sit at home waiting." As police officers swarmed around him, Mark played the part of the desperate father perfectly, just distraught enough to explain his reckless behavior, just cooperative enough to avoid suspicion. He directed them to the building where they would find unconscious kidnappers, but not the leaders, not his daughter. "My baby, did you find her?" he asked with convincing anguish. "We're searching now," Rivera assured him. "Stay here." The moment Rivera turned away, Mark slipped backward, using the confusion and the remaining fog as cover. By the time anyone noticed he was gone, he was already a quarter-mile away, moving through the woods toward the true extraction point. Meanwhile, Santos led Emma through the dense forest to a clearing where a nondescript van waited. "Get in," she ordered. Emma hesitated. "Who are you people? How do you know my dad?" Santos's expression softened slightly. "We worked together long time ago." "As what? Mechanics?" Emma challenged. The woman almost smiled. "Your father was the best of us. That's all you need to know. Right now." Inside the van, Ramirez had secured Lucas to a metal ring bolted to the floor. The mercenary was fully conscious now, his eyes filled with hatred as they fell on Emma. "So the ghost has a family," he sneered. "How touching." "Shut up," Ramirez said, pressing a gun to Lucas's temple. Emma sat as far from Lucas as possible, trying to process everything happening around her. These people, her father's old friends, operated with the seamless coordination that came only from years of working together in high-stress situations. Military, special forces, something else entirely. 30 minutes later, they arrived at what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. Inside, however, was a fully equipped operations center, computers, weapons, medical supplies. "Your father will meet us here," Santos told Emma, guiding her to a chair. "Are you injured?" Emma shook her head, though her wrists were raw from the zip ties, and her lip was still swollen from Lucas's blow. Santos cleaned and bandaged her wounds with quick, efficient movements. "He did this to protect you, you know," Santos said quietly. "Walking away from what we did, what we were, it's almost impossible. He did it for you and your mother." Before Emma could respond, the door opened and Mark entered. He had changed clothes and cleaned up, looking almost like her father again, except for the coldness that still lingered in his eyes. His gaze immediately found Emma, relief washing over his features. Then he turned to Lucas, who glared back with undisguised loathing. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, 37, Lucas spat. Mark approached slowly. "That was never my style, Lucas. Unlike your brother. My brother was a patriot. Your brother was a war criminal who sold classified intelligence that got 26 operatives killed," Mark replied evenly. "I was sent to stop him." Lucas strained against his restraints. "You executed him." "No." Mark's voice was firm. "I offered him surrender. He chose differently." Emma watched this exchange, each word another revelation about the father she thought she knew. Mark turned to Santos and Ramirez. "I need the room. Take Emma outside." "Dad," Emma began to protest. "Please," Mark said, and something in his voice, a plea rather than a command, made Emma comply. Once alone with Lucas, Mark pulled up a chair. 18 years, Lucas. You've been planning this for 18 years. Every day, Lucas confirmed, hatred seething in every syllable. Finding you was almost impossible. You disappeared completely until that car repair bill showed up in a database. Collins Auto Repair. One tiny mistake. Not a mistake, Mark said. I've known you were looking. I've been watching. The mistake was taking my daughter. Lucas laughed bitterly. What now, 37? You going to kill me like you killed my brother? Mark studied him for a long moment. You have two choices. First option, I turn you over to my former employers. They're very interested in the operations you've been running. Human trafficking, arms deals with terrorist cells. That's a black site for the rest of your life. And the second option? Lucas asked, voice dripping with disdain. You disappear. New identity, new life. Never come near my family again. Never. Speak of what happened here. Lucas's laugh was incredulous. You're offering me freedom after what I did to your daughter. Mark leaned forward. I'm offering you what I offered your brother. A chance. Because I'm not who I was then. I have something now that's worth being better for. Outside, Emma paced nervously while Santos and Ramirez maintained a respectful distance. What's he going to do? She asked them. Santos exchanged a glance with Ramirez. Only your father can answer that. The door opened, and Mark emerged alone. His face was unreadable as he approached Emma. What happened? She asked, searching his eyes. Where's Lucas? Making his choice, Mark answered simply. Did you kill him? The question was barely audible. Mark placed his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. No, Emma, that's not who I am anymore. That's not who I want you to see me as. Tears filled Emma's eyes. I don't know who you are at all. The pain in Mark's expression was raw, unfiltered. I'm your father. Everything else I've been, everything I did before you were born, it doesn't matter. What matters is what I chose to become for you.